The small town of Hollow Creek, Maine, was quiet in a way that made the hair on your arm stand on end. Old colonial houses lined the streets, their windows dark and empty, like watching eyes. Most locals avoided the woods on the outskirts, dense, tangled forests that seemed to whisper in the wind. But to 16-year-old Ethan Miller, it was just another summer at Havenridge Academy, a prestigious boarding school nestled at the edge of Hollow Creek Forest. His parents had sent him there for a fresh start, insisting it was the best environment for his grades and social life. Ethan didn't complain. He liked rules, structure, and the kind of discipline his parents demanded. When he arrived, the campus seemed almost alive. The cobblestone walkways shimmered under the setting sun. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the old brick walls. Students laughed in groups, but Ethan noticed something strange. A few of them stared too long, their smiles a little too wide, their eyes glinting in the dim light. First-year orientation starts at 7. "Don't be late," barked Dean Caldwell, a stern man in his 50s whose voice carried the kind of authority that made even the bravest students freeze. Ethan nodded politely, following the swarm of students into the main hall. The dormitory was an imposing Gothic structure, 4 stories high, with narrow hallways that smelled faintly of damp wood and something else, something metallic. Ethan's roommate, Lucas Trent, was already there. Lucas was tall, lanky, and pale, with sharp features that made him look older than 16. "You're new, huh?" Lucas asked, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Havenridge has rules, and if you break them, it has a way of noticing." Ethan laughed nervously, noted, even as he unpacked. Ethan felt a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the feeling of being watched. Every time he turned, shadows seemed to curl and stretch unnaturally across the walls. Later that evening, as the first-year students gathered for dinner in the grand dining hall, an older boy whispered from the table next to him. "You hear the story?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Story?" Ethan asked. "They say this place is cursed," the boy said. "The old wing, the one they closed off after the fire, it's haunted. Students have disappeared. Nobody talks about it, but they vanish, and some say you can still hear them at night." Ethan's stomach tightened. He forced a smile, but the uneasy feeling only grew. That night, as he lay in bed, the lights flickered. At first, he thought it was the storm outside, but then he heard it. Faint whispers, almost too soft to hear, coming from the hallway. A shadow moved across the doorway. Ethan froze. "Who's there?" he whispered. His voice shook. Nothing, just the whisper of wind, or so he hoped. By midnight, the whispers grew louder. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed along the empty hallway outside their dorm. Ethan pulled the blanket over his head, heart racing. And then a voice, soft and chilling, right next to his ear. "Ethan." He bolted upright. The room was empty. Outside, a storm raged, lightning illuminating the twisting forests surrounding the academy. Havenridge Academy was beautiful, majestic, and dead wrong. Something ancient and malevolent had awakened, and somewhere deep in the old wing, something waited. The next morning, Havenridge Academy looked deceptively normal. Sunlight spilled over the red brick walls. Students milled about with backpacks and chatter. And the storm from last night had vanished as if it had never existed. But Ethan couldn't shake the memory of the whisper. His room felt smaller, almost suffocating, as if the walls had leaned in overnight. During breakfast in the grand dining hall, Lucas leaned close. "Last night wasn't just the storm," he said, lowering his voice. "You felt it too, didn't you? The thing." In the hallway, Ethan nodded slowly. "I thought it was nothing." Lucas's eyes darkened. "Nothing. That nothing is why some students vanish here. Some never come back. Havenridge doesn't let them go easily." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to keep his fear buried. He tried to focus on breakfast, on the scrambled eggs and toast, but the sounds around him seemed to sharp the clinking of silverware, The whispers from corners of the hall, he couldn't see clearly. By mid-morning, Ethan noticed more oddities. Doors to classrooms seemed to creak open on their own. Shadows flickered across hallways, even when no one was there. And the older students, they were watching him, always watching. During his first class, History of Hollow Creek, the professor spoke about the town's past. Fires, disappearances, strange deaths. Havenridge Academy had a history that the townspeople preferred to forget. The old wing, he mentioned casually, had been closed for 50 years after a fire that killed several students, though the official records claimed no survivors. Ethan's stomach churned. That was the wing the older boy had whispered about. Last night, later, between classes, Ethan wandered the hallways, trying to find his bearings. The corridors twisted and turned in ways that didn't match the building's blueprint. He paused outside a locked door at the far end of the hall. Behind it, faint scratching sounds echoed like fingernails dragging across wood. A chill ran down his spine. He leaned closer. "Hello," he whispered. Silence, then a soft, almost imperceptible giggle. Ethan spun around. The hallway was empty. He ran to Lucas. "There's something in that old wing," he said, voice tight. Lucas's face went pale. "It's not just something, it's them, the ones who never left." That night, the dorm was alive with unease. Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Shadows seemed to crawl across the walls. Then he heard it again, a whisper, faint, dragging, calling his name from the darkness outside the door. Ethan froze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the room, then scratching, right above his head. The ceiling tiles trembled. He bolted upright. Lucas. No answer. Only silence. Heart pounding. He crept to the door. The hallway was empty. But down at the far end, a faint figure stood under the emergency exit light, motionless, featureless, staring at him, and then it vanished. Ethan realized something terrifying. The old wing wasn't just closed, it was alive. It was watching, waiting, and now it had noticed him. He didn't know it yet, but tonight was only the beginning. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old dorm, every whisper of wind against the windows, made him jump. The shadow he'd seen earlier replayed in his mind again and again. Something in Havenridge Academy was watching, and it was patient. By morning, he knew he had to see the old wing for himself. "Lucas," Ethan said during breakfast, his voice barely audible, over the clatter of dishes, "I'm going to the old wing tonight. I need to see what's there." Lucas froze, then leaned in close. "Ethan, don't. You don't know what's in there. Those doors were locked for a reason. Nobody who goes there comes back the same or comes back at all." Ethan nodded, trying to push down the fear coiling in his stomach. But curiosity and something darker drove him. That night, he waited until the dorm was silent. Lucas had fallen asleep, exhausted from fear and dread. Ethan slipped out of the room, down the hallway, and approached the massive double doors of the old wing. Rust covered the iron handles, and thick chains wrapped around the doors were secured with a heavy padlock. Ethan's hands shook as he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small bolt cutter. One quick snip, and the lock fell to the floor. He swallowed hard, heart pounding like a drum, and pushed the doors open. Inside, the wing smelled of charred wood, mold, and something else, something rotten, almost metallic. The floorboards groaned under his weight. Cobwebs brushed his face. Broken furniture lay scattered. Faded photographs of students lined the walls, their faces scratched out with jagged marks as he walked deeper. A cold wind swept through the corridor, and he could have sworn he heard a faint sobbing echoing down the hall. "Hello?" he called, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Is anyone here?" The sobbing stopped abruptly. Silence fell. Then, from the end of the corridor, a door creaked open slowly. A soft, bluish glow spilled from it. Ethan approached. the glow illuminating a room frozen in time, rows of desks, chalkboards covered in indecipherable writing, and a single journal lying on the teacher's desk. He opened it. The pages were yellowed, brittle, and filled with frantic handwriting. They watch us. They wait. We tried to escape, but the shadows, they follow. Don't trust the doors. Don't look back. Havenridge will never let you leave. Ethan shivered. The journal belonged to a student, someone who had been here decades ago. But the handwriting was eerily familiar. Almost like Lucas's single quotes. Suddenly a cold hand brushed his shoulder. Ethan spun around. No one was there. The whispers returned. Hundreds of voices overlapping, calling names, crying, laughing, screaming. The shadows in the corners of the room thickened, coalescing into forms, faces, twisted and pale, reaching for him. Ethan backed up, heart hammering. The door slammed shut behind him with a deafening crash. He tried to open it. Locked. The padlock was gone. He was trapped. Then he saw it. A figure standing in the corner, barely more than a silhouette, but with glowing red eyes fixed on him. It raised a hand, pointing directly at him. A voice whispered, low and grating, "You shouldn't be here." Ethan stumbled backward, crashing into a desk. The figure lunged forward and disappeared. Panting, Ethan crawled to a window and peered outside. The forest loomed, black and endless. Something moved between the trees. Watching him, he realized the shadows weren't confined to the wing, they were out there too, waiting, patient, hungry. Ethan didn't know how he would escape, or if he could. But one thing was certain: Havenridge Academy wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it had noticed him, and tonight, it would make its move. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to run, but he knew he couldn't leave. The old wing had him trapped, and he wasn't alone. As dawn broke over Havenridge Academy, the main campus seemed ordinary again. But Ethan saw the same glances from the older students, furtive, knowing, almost predatory. They whispered among themselves when he passed, smirking, yet their eyes were empty, unnervingly calm. During morning classes, he tried to act normal, but every time he turned a corner, he saw movement just beyond his vision, shadows that darted and lingered, curling against the walls. One figured girl with hollow eyes and a twisted grin peered in the window of the old wing, staring at him, and then she vanished. By lunch, Ethan had nearly convinced himself he was imagining it all. That was until he found Maya Collins, a timid girl from his dorm, huddled in a corner of the cafeteria, whispering frantically to herself. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, sliding into the bench beside her. They watch us," Maya said, her voice trembling. "I saw them last night. The shadows. They move on their own. And the old wing, it's calling people inside, I think. I think they've taken students before." Ethan's blood ran cold. Taken them? Like, what do you mean? They disappear, Maya said, her eyes darting around. "No one talks about it, but it's true, my brother. He went missing last year. Havenridge never said anything. They just cover it up." The cafeteria suddenly went silent. Across the room, Ethan noticed a group of older boys staring directly at him. Their expressions were blank, emotionless. One of them lifted a hand slightly, and a shiver went down Ethan's spine. It felt like a warning. That night, Ethan decided he had to go back to the old wing. He couldn't ignore the shadows, the whispers, or the missing students. He needed answers. Lucas tried to stop him. "Ethan, if you go back there, there's no telling what you'll find. You're not just facing shadows. You're facing something that's alive, something ancient. Havenridge doesn't forgive curiosity." "I have to," Ethan said, voice shaking. "I need to know what's happening here, before it's too late." By 11 p.m., he crept out of the dorm again, flashlight in hand, and made his way to the old wing. The chains were gone, the doors yawning open, as if they had been waiting. The air was thick, metallic, and cold. Every step echoed through the hall, bouncing off walls that seemed to stretch farther than they should. Inside, he discovered a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The walls were lined with old photographs of students' faces scratched out, eyes blackened. A foul, rotten smell filled the stairwell. Ethan's stomach churned, but he forced himself down. At the bottom, the hallway opened into a vast room, lit only by the faint glow of the moon filtering through cracked windows. And then he saw them, the shadows. They weren't just shadows. They were bodies, twisted and malformed, hovering inches off the ground. Their eyes glowed faintly red, and their mouths moved in silent screams. One turned toward him. A voice rasped. Inside his mind, not out loud, "You should not have come." Ethan tried to back away, but the shadows surged forward. Panic rose in his chest. He stumbled into a corner, and then, out of the darkness, a figure appeared. A boy, translucent and blue, floating just above the ground. "Ethan," the ghost said. His face was bruised, eyes hollow. "You have to stop them. Havenridge, it's alive. It feeds on fear, and it doesn't let go." Before Ethan could respond, a wall of shadow slammed toward him. He screamed, blinded by darkness, and everything went black. When he awoke, he was lying in the old wing's main hallway. The shadows were gone, for now, but he could still feel them, circling, watching, waiting. Ethan knew one thing: tonight was only the beginning. Havenridge Academy had secrets far older and far more terrifying than he could imagine, and whatever it wanted, it would not let him leave alive. Ethan didn't sleep again that night. Even in his bed, the shadows seemed to creep under the door, lingering near the corners, watching, waiting. He tried to convince himself that the old wing was an isolated nightmare, but deep down, he knew the danger was spreading. Havenridge Academy wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it was hunting the next day. Ethan sought out Maya. He needed allies, someone who knew more than he did about the Academy's dark secrets. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Ethan asked, as they walked through the tree-lined campus. Maya nodded, her pale face tight with fear. "I've seen it before," she whispered. "Some students are marked. I'm one of them." Ethan stopped in his tracks. "Marked? What does that mean?" Maya hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Then she pointed to a faint scar along her wrist, almost like a brand. "The shadows, they touch some of us. Leave marks. After that, we can hear them, feel them, even when we're not in the old wing. They follow us, and every night, it gets worse." Ethan's stomach turned. "How many students are marked?" "Too many," Maya said. "Most disappear quietly. The faculty pretends they left on their own. Some just vanish into the old wing, and their bodies are never found." Ethan swallowed. He couldn't imagine how many had already fallen victim to Havenridge. He needed answers, and fast. That night, they met in the library, poring over old records and student journals. Most were yellowed and decaying, describing disappearances, strange markings, and warnings from previous students. One journal, however, stood out. "The Academy feeds on fear. The shadows are not spirits, they are extensions of the school itself. It chooses who it wants, tests them, torments them. If you resist, it punishes. If you give in, you are lost forever. Never enter the old wing alone. Never trust the teachers. They know, but they do nothing." Ethan looked up from the journal. "This isn't just a haunting. Havenridge is alive." Maya nodded, fear in her eyes. "And tonight, it's going to come for you." The air grew colder as they left the library. The corridors were empty, unnervingly quiet. And then Ethan felt the prickling sensation in the back of his neck, stronger than ever. Shadows moved in the corners of his vision, curling and twisting, forming shapes that weren't quite human. A low, rasping whisper filled the hallway. "Ethan, come to us." He froze. From the shadows, a figure emerged, doy, transparent, and blue eyes hollow, face bruised. Who are you?" Ethan asked. I'm Liam, the ghost said. I was here years ago. I was marked, like Maya. They won't stop. Havenridge wants fear. It feeds on it. And it's coming for you now. Suddenly, a surge of shadows shot across the hallway, slamming into Ethan and Maya. The floor beneath them trembled, the walls groaning like they were alive. Desks, chairs, and debris swirled into the air. The shadows coalesced into a massive, writhing form, a dark figure with dozens of glowing red eyes. Ethan grabbed Maya's hand. Run. They sprinted down the hallway, the shadows in pursuit. Every corner they turned seemed to stretch further, the doors leading them deeper into the old wing. Faint cries of other students echoed around them, trapped in the darkness, warning them. Finally, they reached a stairwell that led to the ground floor. But before they could descend, the shadows blocked the exit, forming an impenetrable wall of darkness. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening. You belong here. You belong here. Ethan's heart pounded. He knew they couldn't fight the shadows with force, they were outmatched. But they could outsmart them. Follow me, he shouted, spotting a narrow maintenance tunnel hidden behind a false panel in the wall. They squeezed through, the shadows writhing and shrieking behind them, unable to follow in such tight space. Breathing heavily, they emerged in an unused storage room. The walls were lined with crates, cobwebs, and old student belongings. Ethan looked at Maya. We're not safe yet. Havenridge knows we're here, and tonight, it will come back stronger. Maya nodded, terrified but resolute. We need to warn the others. We need to find the marked students before it's too late. Ethan clenched his fists. He had seen the shadows, felt their hunger, and survived. But he knew that surviving tonight was just the beginning. Havenridge Academy was alive, and it was learning. Ethan and Maya didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old dorm, every whisper of wind, reminded them that Havenridge Academy was far from ordinary. They had survived the shadows but barely, and now they knew that surviving wasn't enough. Using the maintenance tunnel, they navigated through a maze of hidden passages beneath the school. The air was damp, cold, and carried the faint, metallic stench of decay. Crumbling walls bore faded symbols, almost ritualistic, etched into the stone. Some resembled letters, others were grotesque faces twisted in silent screams. This isn't just a building, Maya whispered. It's a trap. It's designed to hold people, to consume them. Ethan nodded, trying to steady his shaking hands. We need to find the marked students. If we can get them out, maybe we can stop it. They rounded a corner and discovered a hidden chamber. Inside, several students huddled together, pale, trembling, their wrists branded with faint, dark marks like Maya's. Their eyes flicked toward Ethan and Maya with a mixture of hope and terror. One boy, Caleb, stepped forward. You're not dead, he stammered. The shadows, they've been taking us, one by one. Some of us, we didn't make it out. Ethan clenched his fists. We're getting out, tonight. The group listened as Maya and Ethan explained the maintenance tunnels and the old wing. But before they could move, a cold, suffocating presence filled the chamber. The shadows were coming stronger, faster, hungrier. A deep, rumbling voice echoed from the darkness. Fools, you cannot escape. Havenridge claims all who enter. Ethan could feel the walls pulsing, as if the school itself were breathing. The shadows surged, forming massive, grotesque shapes with glowing red eyes, reaching for them with long, clawed fingers. Run, Ethan shouted. They sprinted down the tunnels, weaving through narrow passages, the shadows clawing at their heels. Caleb stumbled, crying out, but Ethan grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. Finally, they reached a spiral staircase that led to a forgotten cellar beneath the school. Old crates, broken furniture, and remnants of long-forgotten classrooms filled the space. On the far wall, Ethan noticed a strange symbol, a circle, with runes etched around it, faintly glowing. This This looks like some kind of ritual, Ethan whispered. Maybe it's how Havenridge controls the shadows. Maya approached cautiously. We could use it to stop them, but we need to be careful. If we fail, they'll consume us all. The shadows' whispers grew louder, almost deafening now. You cannot escape. You cannot escape. You belong here. Ethan knew they had to act. Using the journal he had found in the old wing, they began deciphering the symbols, tracing them onto the floor with chalk from the storage room. Caleb and the others helped, their hands trembling as they finished the final symbol. The air grew colder, heavier, and the shadows recoiled, shrieking in frustration. A figure appeared at the end of the cellar, a teacher, or something that once had been human, with eyes black as void and a twisted, knowing smile. You think you can stop what has existed here for centuries? The figure hissed. Havenridge does not forgive. It does not forget. You will all become part of it. Ethan's pulse raced. He knew they had only one chance. He grabbed Maya's hand, and together, they activated the ritual circle. Light erupted from the runes, blinding and pure. The shadows shrieked, twisting violently, trying to resist the light. The dark figure screamed, reaching for them, but the circle held firm. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. The shadows writhed and screamed, then silence. The glow faded. The cellar was empty, still. Ethan and Maya looked around. The marked students were safe for now, but the knowledge of what they had faced lingered, heavy and suffocating. Ethan realized something terrifying. This was only temporary. Havenridge Academy was alive. It had been feeding for centuries, and now it knew they were trying to fight back. Somewhere in the darkness, a whisper echoed, faint but chilling. This isn't over? Not by far. The morning after the ritual, Havenridge Academy seemed deceptively calm. Sunlight spilled over the Gothic towers, and the students moved between classes as if nothing had happened. But Ethan and Maya knew better. The shadows weren't gone. They were waiting, hiding, calculating. The marked students, including Caleb, had stayed hidden in the abandoned storage room all morning. They spoke in hushed tones, planning their next move. We can't stay here, Ethan said. We need to warn the others. We need to get out of this school before it kills more people. Maya nodded, her eyes scanning the hallways nervously. But the teachers, some of them are in on it. They know what happens in the old wing. They cover it up. Havenridge protects itself. Ethan clenched his fists. Then we'll expose it ourselves. They ventured out of the storage room carefully, sticking to side corridors and avoiding the older students. As they moved, they noticed more strange signs, doors that led to nowhere, walls that shifted when they weren't looking. Faint scratches along the wood like fingernails had clawed through it. Then they found a classroom unlike the others. Its windows were boarded up, walls lined with blackened mirrors, and a thick, oppressive darkness hung in the air. On the floor lay dozens of journals, each belonging to a student who had disappeared over the years. Ethan picked one up. The handwriting was frantic. It watches everything. I tried to escape, but the walls moved. The teachers, they are part of it. Havenridge, it feeds on us. If anyone reads this, run. A shiver ran down his spine. Every word confirmed what they already feared. The school wasn't just haunted, it was intelligent, alive, and malevolent. Suddenly, a cold wind swept the room. The mirrors darkened, and shadowy figures emerged, crawling along the walls and ceiling. The whispers started again, louder, almost deafening. You belong to us. You belong to us. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, Dean Caldwell himself, or something that once had been him. His eyes were black voids, and his smile was twisted and unnatural. You shouldn't be here, the dean hissed. Havenridge has existed for centuries. It chooses who will serve it, who will feed it, and who will vanish. Ethan backed up, dragging Maya with him. Why? Why the shadows? Why the students? The dean's voice echoed in the room, distorted and inhuman. Havenridge is alive. It is hunger. It is power. Students are sustenance. Fear is its fuel. And now, you've entered its domain. You cannot leave until it has decided your fate. The mirrors rippled, and the shadows surged, blocking the exits. The students screamed as their reflections began moving independently, reaching out to touch them. Ethan grabbed Maya's hand, trying to push through the crowd of shadows. Then he remembered the ritual circle. If they could just reach the symbols, maybe they could hold the shadows off again. With Caleb's help, they fought through the darkness, guiding the marked students toward the old wing's hidden tunnels. The shadows swarmed, grabbing at them, pulling at their hair, scratching at their skin. Some students cried out in pain as faint. Burning marks appeared on their arms, another layer of Havenridge's control. Finally, they reached the maintenance tunnel leading to the cellar where they had completed the ritual. Panting, terrified, Ethan drew the circle on the floor again, the runes glowing faintly. The shadows hesitated, shrieking in frustration, but this time, they were smarter. They attacked the circle more aggressively, coiling, twisting, trying to break its power. Ethan and Maya held their ground, chanting the protective words they had deciphered from the journals. For a moment, it seemed like they might succeed. But then the dean stepped into the circle, his form flickering between human and shadow, and the room went completely black. A whisper slithered into Ethan's mind, cold and venomous. "You cannot stop Havenridge, not ever." And then he felt it, the shadows pressing in from all sides, colder, heavier, more real than ever before. The fight was far from over. The cellar was silent once again. Ethan's heart pounded as he tried to catch his breath. The shadows had recoiled, but only temporarily. Havenridge Academy wasn't finished with them yet. "We can't just keep running," Ethan whispered to Maya. "We need to know what we're up against." Maya nodded. There's something in the archives. I saw it once. Old records, hidden maps. They explain what Havenridge is, what it really wants. We have to find it." The group of marked students followed them. Through the twisting maintenance tunnels, their fear palpable, but determination stronger. Caleb led the way, carrying a flashlight with a flickering beam. After what felt like hours, they reached a sealed door, hidden behind a stack of crates. The air around it was colder, heavier, almost alive. Maya traced her fingers over the worn wood. "This is it. This is the archives." Ethan pushed the door open. Dust swirled in the air, illuminated by the weak beam of the flashlight. The room was enormous, filled with shelves of books, journals, and strange artifacts. At the center, a large, black stone pedestal held an ancient tome, bound in dark leather, etched with symbols that seemed to writhe when stared at directly. "This is it," Caleb breathed. "This tells the story of Havenridge, why it exists." Ethan opened the tome. The pages were brittle, but filled with intricate diagrams, symbols, and handwritten entries spanning centuries. He read aloud. Havenridge Academy was founded over 300 years ago by a cult devoted to the manipulation of fear. The building itself was constructed over a confluence of dark energies, binding the spirits of those who died on its grounds. The academy feeds on the fear and suffering of its students, growing stronger each year. It is alive, sentient, and eternal. Maya's eyes widened. "So it's not just a school. It's a predator," Ethan continued, voice shaking. "The shadows are extensions of the academy. They hunt, torment, and mark students. Once marked, a student is bound to Havenridge. Resistance leads to death. Submission leads to servitude in the shadows. Only the knowledge of the ancient protective rituals can repel the darkness temporarily." A low, rumbling laughter echoed through the archives. The shadows were coming, faster, closer. Ethan slammed the tome shut. "We need to act. If Havenridge knows we have this knowledge, it's going to come for us now." They grabbed the tome and ran through the tunnels, the shadows slithering along walls, reaching for them with clawed, formless hands. They emerged into a hallway in the old wing, the full weight of the academy pressing down on them. Suddenly, the dean appeared, more monstrous than before, his form flickering between human and shadow. You cannot escape. You cannot leave. Havenridge is eternal. And now, you know too much. Ethan raised the tome. Maybe we do know too much, but knowledge is power. Havenridge might be ancient, but it's not invincible. The shadows lunged. Ethan recited the protective incantations, the runes on the tome glowing with fierce light. The shadows shrieked and recoiled, writhing in agony. The dean roared in fury, slamming into the glowing circle Ethan drew on the floor. The room shook violently. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling. The marked students clung to each other, chanting along with Ethan and Maya, their fear fueling the light in a strange, almost paradoxical way. For a moment, the dean froze. The shadows hesitated. The walls of Havenridge itself seemed to tremble. Then, a whisper came not from the shadows, but from the building itself. This is not the end. Ethan knew she was right. Havenridge had been weakened, but it was far from destroyed. The Academy's heart was still alive, still feeding, still plotting, and somewhere in the depths of the old wing, something far older than the dean waited, patient, eternal, and hungry. Ethan and Maya exchanged a glance. They had uncovered the truth. They had survived, for now. But Havenridge Academy had only just revealed its first move. The shadows never slept. Havenridge Academy's corridors pulsed with a malevolent life of their own. Every step Ethan, Maya, and the marked students took echoed like a drumbeat, announcing their presence to the darkness. They made their way back to the old wing's heart, the place where the Academy's power seemed strongest, a massive, circular chamber at the center of the building, sealed centuries ago and rumored to contain the Academy's source of sentience. The heart of Havenridge. Ethan whispered, "If we destroy whatever is there, maybe we can end this." Maya shook her head. "Destroy it. We barely know what it is, and if we fail, it'll consume us." Ethan clenched the ancient tome. "We don't have a choice. We fight, or Havenridge wins forever." The chamber door groaned as they approached, shadows swirling around the edges like living smoke. As they entered, a blast of cold air struck them, nearly knocking them off their feet. Inside, the chamber was enormous, its walls etched with glowing runes. At the center floated a dark mass, shifting constantly, a vortex of shadows and writhing faces. From it, a voice rumbled, all-encompassing and ancient. "You dare enter my heart. You dare defy me." Ethan felt the darkness pressing into his mind, twisting his thoughts, dredging up every fear he'd ever had. Panic clawed at him, but he forced himself to focus. "Everyone," he shouted, "the circle. We need to create the protective symbol together." The marked students arranged themselves around the chamber, drawing runes on the floor, with chalk scavenged from the maintenance tunnels. Ethan and Maya recited the incantations from the tome, the glowing symbols pulsating with light. The shadows reacted instantly, surging toward them with horrifying speed, screaming in voices that were not entirely human. The dark mass at the center writhed violently, dozens of glowing red eyes opening in its form. "You cannot stop me," it hissed. "I am Havenridge. I am eternal. Your fear feeds me. Your lives belong to me." Ethan gritted his teeth, chanting louder. Maya's voice trembled, but remained steady. The runes flared brighter, forcing the shadows back. Though the dark mass resisted violently, the air itself trembling with its rage. Suddenly, the dean appeared, flickering between human and shadow, shrieking. He lunged at Ethan, claws extended, but Caleb and the other students pushed him back, holding the energy of the circle strong. The chamber shook. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as the shadows writhed, trying to escape the circle's protective barrier. Faces of past students twisted within the vortex, some silent, some screaming in terror, pleading for release. Ethan took a deep breath. "Now," he yelled, pointing the tome toward the center. "We finish it together." The light from the runes surged, connecting with the tome's energy. The dark mass screamed a sound that shook the foundations of the building. Shadows writhed, clawing at each other, then evaporated like smoke in sunlight. The dean's form flickered violently, then collapsed into nothingness. The vortex at the center exploded into a blinding light, the runes searing into the walls, burning away centuries of darkness. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. The air no longer pressed against their minds. The oppressive weight of Havenridge had lifted, or at least diminished. Ethan sank to his knees, exhausted, as Maya did the same. The marked students looked around, stunned but alive. "We did it," Maya whispered. Ethan shook his head. "Not completely. Havenridge is wounded, but it's still here. It may come back, and next time." His voice trailed off. Outside, the wind howled through Hollow Creek, as if mourning or perhaps warning. Somewhere in the distance, the academy's windows reflected faint shadows, lingering, patient, watching. Ethan knew the battle was over for now, but Havenridge Academy had not yet surrendered. It would always hunger, always wait, always plan, and they had survived to fight another day. The first light of dawn crept through the tall, Gothic windows of Havenridge Academy. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. The oppressive darkness that had weighed on the school seemed diminished. But Ethan and Maya knew better. In the aftermath of the battle, at the heart of the old wing, the marked students gathered. In the storage room, faces pale, bruised, but alive, they looked at each other with a fragile sense of hope. "We survived," Ethan said quietly. "But Havenridge isn't gone. It's wounded, but it's still here." Caleb nodded. "We need to warn others. We can't let it claim more students. The school can't be trusted." Maya's eyes were hard. "We have to expose at every teacher, every staff member involved in the cover-ups. The town has to know what's happening here," Ethan agreed. "We take the evidence, the journals, the tome, and bring it to the authorities. Hollow Creek needs to see the truth." The group moved cautiously through the academy, gathering everything they could. Most of the shadows were gone, though. Faint whispers still lingered in corners, reminding them that Havenridge's presence was never truly absent. As they reached the main hall, Ethan paused. He looked at the towering doors of the old wing, scarred and ominous. A subtle movement caught his eye, a shadow curling in the corner, fleeting, but unmistakably watching. "It's not over," he whispered. Maya grabbed his arm. "Maybe not, but we survived, and now we fight smarter." They emerged into the town just as authorities arrived, called by concerned parents and teachers who had finally been alerted. The students handed over journals, the tome, and detailed accounts of the horrors they had endured. Investigators frowned at the reports, clearly skeptical, but the evidence was undeniable. The academy's history, the old wing, the disappearances, Hollow Creek's small news stations picked up the story, sparking national attention. Havenridge Academy was placed under investigation, and the old wing was sealed permanently, though rumors among students persisted. Sometimes, at night, lights flickered inside, and shadows moved behind the boarded-up windows. Ethan and Maya returned to the storage room one last time. They stood silently, staring at the remnants of the battle. "Do you think it's really over?" Ethan asked. Maya shook her head. "No, Havenridge is ancient. It's patient, but now we know how to fight it, and that counts for something." They stepped outside into the morning sun, feeling the warmth on their faces. The air smelled of pine and earth life continuing despite the horrors that had unfolded inside the academy. Yet, as they looked back, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the school was watching, waiting, learning. Somewhere in the darkness of the old wing, a faint whisper echoed, just audible over the wind. "This isn't the end, not by far." Ethan and Maya shared a grim look. They had survived, They had exposed the truth, but they understood now that some darkness never truly dies. It only waits for the next moment to return. And in the town of Hollow Creek, Havenridge Academy remained a silent predator, cloaked in brick and shadow, eternal, patient, and hungry.